So this video is about the first key physiological concept, which is steady state. Now, to know about steady state, we need to make sure we know about our heart rate and what that measures. So our heart rate, which is measured in beats per minute, is an indication of our intensity. So how hard we are working. Okay. The way that you figure out your predicted heart rate maximum, the highest rate that you can work at, is calculated by this formula, 220 minus your age. Now, you can do your own, but I am 29, so you can see that that is a predicted heart rate of predicted maximum heart rate of 191 beats per minute. There we go. So if I was working at my absolute maximum, my heart rate would be 191 beats per minute. Now, these two graphs that we have here, number 1 and number 2, one of them represents me playing netball and the other one represents me going for a run. So I'll give you some time to have a think about which might be which, and we'll revisit that later on. In graph 1, I can see that my maximum heart rate that I got to was 181 beats per minute. My average across the whole session was 158. If I wanted to calculate the percent of my maximum heart rate that I was working at, this is how I would do it. I was working at 181 beats per minute, and I divide that by my maximum heart rate. And then I times that number by 100. 181 divided by 100. And that equals 95% of my heart rate max. So we would say that it is working at a maximal level. In graph 2, let's have a look at the fact that my average heart rate across the session was 127 beats per minute. Same formula. So the heart rate that I've calculated divided by my maximum heart rate, and then times that by 100, 66%. Okay, so across the session number 2, on average, I was working at 66% of my maximum intensity. So that's how we can use heart rate to calculate that. Now, have you had to think about which graph shows which? So which one is netball and which one is a run? I will tell you about that, and we'll talk about the differences as I clear the page. Okay, so graph 1 is me going for a run. Okay, so continuous training. So I ran for 37 minutes. And in graph 2, this is me playing netball, which was an hour and 10 worth of the game. So what you can see in the run is at the start of the run, at the start of the run, I had a quick increase in heart rate, very quickly, all right. But then for a period of it, it stayed relatively steady. Okay. Then again, it dropped back down. It's gone down on the graph, but then stayed relatively steady here. Same has repeated then. Okay. So we can see that I have increased my intensity and then kept it level, decreased my intensity, up again, and so on. What do you think that might indicate about what I was doing when I was running? If I was having a decrease in intensity, it meant that I had stopped to walk. Okay, so remembering that heart rate is related to intensity. The other thing that is also related to is think about when we start running, what else also increases. So our heart rate might increases, but so does our breathing rate. And as our breathing rate increases, that means we are increasing the amount of oxygen we are getting into our body. We call this our VO2, which is the volume, so how much, of oxygen consumption. So we can tell that as I start running, I've increased my heart rate, I've increased my intensity, and I've also increased my oxygen consumption. But then that has stayed relatively steady. It hasn't been going up. It's decreased, my heart rate and my oxygen consumption decrease as I rest and then go up again as I work. So you can see that steady state at the top where my intensity has leveled out. So steady state equals the leveled out section of the graph, which means that our oxygen consumption and our heart rate are at a level that is meeting the demands of the activity. However, in netball, you can see that this changes all over the place. So there's not any one time where heart rate is staying steady. That's because in netball we have varying intensities and varying efforts. Okay, so my heart rate is constantly changing. My heart rate and my intensity, and therefore also my oxygen consumption, are always changing in relation to the types of movements I'm doing on the court. So steady state is the period where the oxygen consumption and heart rate are at a level where they are meeting the demands of the body, but we are not in steady state when we are continually varying our intensity and changing our efforts, because our cardiovascular system and our respiratory system are trying to catch up to meet the demands of the body. So that is steady state. Pop a definition for that into your glossary in a way that you understand. You may wish to draw a diagram